Hello and welcome to the Data Dudes. I'm Izzy.
I'm Raka, and you guys are Dead Dudes Nation. You are rocking it. You are making us go. You're giving us life every day. We are very appreciative for your likes, subscribes, and all your feedback. Keep it coming.
Definitely. And we're back again with another episode of the True Crime series. And after a slight hiatus, we're back. This time we have Dennis Nilsen, also known as the Muswell Hill murderer, the kindly killer, the British Jeffrey Dahmer, Dez, among other names. Supposedly,
And of course, unfortunately, Dennis the Menace.
yes, he's been attributed to anywhere from 12 to 15 murders that we know of that has been, you know, documented. And his MO is rape, necrophilia, dismemberment, among other nasty things. So, Raka, take it away. We're going to get into the Netflix show or Netflix documentary that the confession, the tapes. I forgot exactly what it's called, but take it away, Raka.
Well, you said it. You said it straight. There's many things that go into our selection of who will be the topic of the day, especially in our true crime series. But because in particular Netflix is running this documentary right now, it did catch our eye. Honestly, I'm letting you know that I didn't know anything about him. I may have heard him in ramblings, but since A, he's from the UK, and B, um, maybe doesn't have the same kind of notoriety as other serial killers. We were unaware in full depth. So we watched the episode um, on Netflix, and it was, I guess, the confessions of Dennis Nilsen.
Yeah, it was amazing the fact that someone went to the lengths of recording himself, and you have these clear, concise confessions of what happened, which is pretty fascinating stuff, you know.
Well, it's wild because there was some author, right? And obviously, the documentary is not a linear journey. It starts off from his capture, and then dives delve into the victim's family, the times, the setting, then his background. But mainly, everything that's extracted is weirdly, oddly enough, from his point of view.
Yeah.
There was a writer at the time that corresponded with him that was intrigued by his story. And then the writer asked if we could know more. And actually, from the onset of his capture, he was pretty free to donate information about his killings, his activities, his productivities, his likes, dislikes, why he did things. I mean, he was an open book, but he started to have recording sessions, write letters. I mean, he was pretty open, and then he was also interested himself into this book venture.
Which
And this is where
writing,
the
he ended up writing it a 400-page autobiography that was unpublished, and it was called The History of a Drowning Boy.
yeah, well, yeah, that's a little foreshadowing, but pretty much.
So,
The thing with Dennis is, well, let's just take it for. Well, actually, okay, Izzy, how do you feel about the documentary itself
but
on Netflix?
the documentary was well done, and it brought to light a lot of what Nilsen was about. And it starts with how he got caught, and then it goes deeper into how they discovered him and deeper into his whole life. What I did like is the fact that when they interviewed his mother and they were like, okay, no, he was such a good boy and this and that. And oh, by the way, do not forget to like and subscribe if you like this content. Keep us going, you know. So, and his mom goes, "Oh, he was such a good boy, this and that." And then at the moment they find a piece and where he disagrees that all his life wasn't all nice and peachy keen and you know that mom's a liar basically, you know, and that his whole thing, as we've mentioned many a time, the majority, if not all, of these serial killers have had bad childhoods, and Nilsen is no different. Doesn't excuse what they've done, doesn't justify anything what they've done. They're still, you know, pieces of crap, in my opinion. But there's a direct cause and effect. And basically, this documentary fiction, it just tells you and keeps going, goes deeper into the whole thing. And it also goes into how the media did, you know, did the whole situation wrong and kind of they took a certain angle towards the murders, and which was, you know, kind of fucked up. So, all in all, well
Well,
done.
yeah, we can get into that, but since you touch upon it now, the unfortunate thing is we're talking about early 80s in London, and there's still
Yeah, yeah. Well, from
at the time,
78 to 83. So yeah. So you're talking about early
yeah,
80s.
at the time there still was a an aura of homophobia in in London. There was a part of London well known called the West End, and the West End is not glamorous at all. And this is, I guess, the fringe of society.
Yeah. Think of
Being, we could get to
Second
his
Street back in the
childhood
day.
later, right? And you have like the perfect storm, like unfortunately with many other the cases that we investigated, you have media trying to make their name. You have police officers and detectives trying to make their name. You have um, other forces at work, maybe lawyers and people of different influences that you hope to God they don't put in jeopardy justice. But unfortunately, they almost did on all accounts. Like
Yep.
to take you back to Son of Sam, the media itself, they were publishing articles, they were publishing letters, not going through the police first. Like you never. What do you want first? You want to make your name and stake your claim to publication, or do you want to help stop a killer
The people
at
they want.
large?
Bottom line is that these assholes, not all of them, but some, they want their cake and eat it too. They want the crime to be solved. They want to be the ones to solve it, the first ones to have the information while it gets done. And sometimes it, like you mentioned before, it interferes within investigation and everything in between. You go and you make the fact that Nilsen was gay a focal point, or he's the gay killer. It it sends everything. You forget the fact that there was 12 to 15 bodies, up to 15, you know, young men who were murdered, and you turn it into, you sensationalize it about him being gay, which wasn't. It's a fact, yes, but it wasn't about that.
And whether that had any effect at all, or none, or some, to any degree to the victims testifying, or more importantly, to any of the survivors, is they were already warned once you go to testify, the attorneys will try to shred you to pieces, and you're never going to live any kind of respectable public life and have any privacy thereafter, because now everything is going to be out in the open, and they're just going to magnify your lifestyle
Of
for
course,
bad or for good. And
definitely,
this made a lot of witnesses wary about testifying,
because
which it should be the reverse, where they should glorify the fact that you're willing to take ridicule, unjustly so, in order to get justice done and put this heinous killer behind bars where he should be. Um,
that point in the early '80s, you have in the West End, you had all the rent boys, all the young male prostitutes out there, and they were obviously the majority of the people who were there. Obviously, were gay men, but also were quote unquote straight men who have families who went and search and to spend time with the rent boys, and that is what who is gonna
who's going to
testify
miss them?
exactly
Yeah.
who's this them and who's gonna testify when these guys. Oh, that's why unfortunately over a span of 3 to 4 years nobody cared about these young men that they disappeared. It's
He went relatively
fucked up.
unchecked, and as we uncovered through most of these serial killers, to point out especially Samuel Little and and a number of the scorecard killer, these individuals, they're all sick puppies. They're not sick enough that they know they're going to target victims that no one's going to miss, so they can keep on doing this.
They're the
Once you're
worst.
behind bars, you can't do this no more.
They're the worst kind of predators. That they prey on the helpless, on the
Yeah.
people, on the fringes of society, who people won't miss, and that is unfortunate. And there was one case in particular, one moment in particular, where they had him dead to rights, and one of the kids escaped.
And how did he escape? He jumped through the damn window.
He jumped through the damn window because he somehow, in the middle of the whole thing, he woke up and saw this guy about to kill him, or in the process to do some serious harm to him. So he would rather jump out the window naked
Then die.
than die. Then
And
when
this goes without saying. Before going any further, of course, there's going to be some extremely graphic material here.
mm-hmm.
If you made it this far without knowing that we're going to dive into this murky world, it's on you. But just friendly warning and reminder that it's going to get not for the faint-hearted in the next few minutes. So that itself is now the Netflix documentary, where they go back and forth between his recordings, his letters, his correspondence, a lot of the victims and survivors, the families of the victims, and the police officers at the time, and everybody involved. With that said, how do you feel that the documentary on Netflix, as a total complete work, what's your feeling on it? Is he watchable, good, bad,
Oh, it's
incomplete?
definitely watchable because it brought to light a person that I didn't know much about, and it was tastefully done in the sense that it took the victims and respected them and brought their families and gave them a chance to voice their feelings and and the grief. Basically, it basically gave them closure. You know,
Yeah, I
which
mean, considering this is more than 30 years ago.
now, if you're looking for something that gives you more in depth about Nelson and gives you the real, like real like deep, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Right.
It wasn't like that.
Yeah, it wasn't a complete timeline.
Gave you something,
It
a little
was more
something.
of a cinematic piece.
Exactly. They gave you a little something, and then they said, all right, this happened, and now we're gonna free flow. We're gonna
Absolutely. So with that said, I do myself also recommend it. I think it's a very good true crime piece. I think it's well done. Of anything you really want is to have all sides of the story presented, and like you said, with due justice and respect to families involved. What it did, I think, very well too, is it brought you back to the times of the 80s, because you had to, if you're a younger generation, you may not know, you know, little things about the time. Like there were cell phones, you don't get mass flash media. There was maybe four news channels. Four. Today you have like, too many, 40,000. So
Exactly.
the
You
news
wrote
wants
this
to jump on it right away.
because you say like all the '80s. It's such a long time ago. I mean, in a way, I guess it was, but yet it's not. The amount of
This is
technology,
almost 40 years ago.
but the amount of technology and the amount of stuff that's happened since then is just astronomical. It's lifetimes, lifetimes.
Right. So, with that said, that's the Netflix part of Dennis. And we can just briefly now segue into a deeper dive, which we usually do, into the timeline, the machinations, possibly into the crazy head of said serial killer, Dennis Nilsen, who was born, I believe, in 1945.
Yep.
His father is from, I believe, the Netherlands or one
Yeah,
of the Scandinavian countries.
he was a Norwegian soldier. You know.
And the again,
Then the
please don't misconstrue. We are not justifying anything. We're just trying to provide insight into the warped mindset of said individual. And we're talking about a father who was rarely there, a marriage that was not much of a marriage, and with one older brother and one younger sister, they were left largely in the hands of the mom, and in particular raised by her parents. And even more particular, he had a close bond with his grandfather. Again, this is according to him.
of course,
So take what you want with a grain of salt, because I always think there's a lot that just comes from his tapes and confessions, but this is his viewpoint. We already know he's screwed in the head. So you kind of have to read through the lines. I don't doubt there's this bond, but I think he embellishes a lot because he only knew this grandfather at the age of 5 or 6. You tell me what you remember from 5 or 6.
Yeah, but look, it's recorded. It's been said obviously from Nelson himself that his father wasn't much of a father figure and didn't really care to be a father figure.
No,
He was a
he was
soldier.
a sailor. Yeah, he was in and out.
He was sent from Norway to Scotland to for safety, and I do believe he died. Um, had a heart attack.
59 or something. Yeah, he was out at sea.
Yeah, well, that sea, and then that's when his grandfather became essentially the father figure. Until his death in 1951.
He claims these early memories of being with his grandfather, and his grandfather's a fisherman as well. So there definitely is something with the sea and the water.
Yeah.
And usually we tell this at the end and we get to it, but it needs to be brought out now. His mode of execution was strangulation and then drowning or bathing his victims. There's something with water, whether it's cleansing, it's yearning for that attachment with his grandfather, something crazy. Because he usually does this after the dead already. He just drowned him. Sometimes the victim's still alive and he resuscitates them and then drowns them. Again, sick puppy. And there's even more into the ritual that we'll get into later. So there's grandfather and the absence of grandfather when he passes away, which notably he says when grandfather died. I think he was 6 or so. And he says that his mom had told him grandpa went to a better place.
Right.
To which he was upset. Almost like, well, why can't he take me with him to this better place instead of being stuck here with you bozos?
Not exactly.
I mean, again, still nothing in his childhood screams overt abuse.
No. I mean, the biggest thing, like you mentioned, is the fact that his grandfather died, and that sent him to become more reserved and shun adults' affection. And he used to love to go to the harbor alone by himself and watch the fishing boats. And then supposedly between 1954 and 1955, he fell into the water, and he became submerged. And this is where he did not panic, and he had a
A cathartic event.
cathartic life death experience. And
Yeah.
this goes back to what you were saying about him, his whole thing about the drowning. And it's all
He says at that moment that he felt his grandfather's touch. And he thought for a moment his grandfather was going to, his spirit of his grandfather was going to save him from drowning. And he never felt more tranquility than at that point in his life. Now, whether this was a true near death experience, everybody can debate that. However, he still draws to this tie that he has with his grandfather, which in my opinion serves as a crutch for the rest of his life. It's like an out. Why am I drowning these victims? Why am I killing these victims? Why do I long for to attain peace and happiness when he's like limiting himself?
yeah.
Nobody will ever fill the shoes of his grandfather. Like, I'm sorry to say this, slap him upside the head and say, get on with your freaking life.
Oh,
Tough shit. Life is life.
Oh, Rocka, come on.
So I mean, again, his mom remarried. They had more siblings. By all accounts, they lived not extravagant means, but the parents worked hard to provide for the big family. Again, tough shit, mother. You didn't have, you had a roof over your head and some food. You weren't sexually abused. You weren't beaten. You weren't like other people we investigated that were just, I mean, heinous childhood. So he had issues. Okay. And then he gets towards puberty, and he says that around 13, 14 in his introduction to puberty, he realizes that he's gay, he's homosexual.
Well, he actually
And but
did
he's
not
still
know yet.
confused.
So he fondled his
Yes.
sister and his brother
He
to
experienced.
yeah.
Yes.
Which
Now his younger sister, that's a little that's not a little, that's really, really bad. For his older brother, he wasn't having that shit. And his older brother, Olaf, he he publicly humiliated and beat him, and then referred to him in the Scottish word hen, which translates in Scottish some loosely, I guess, to girl. So this is where he's beginning to get some ridicule. And you got Big Brother, who no doubtably, at least the way he poses it, Big Brother is a bully.
Yep.
And Big Brother will stop at nothing to ridicule him. And then that comes into play a little later in life. So he is, at the very least, homosexual, possibly bisexual, but he's struggling with some sexual identity. And it doesn't help that he's not getting this from home, and he's also a loner. So there's no support system. I get it.
Of course, and again, let's not forget this is way early. I mean, so
yeah, this is, you're talking about the 50s.
Yeah.
You know, mid 50s and 60s, where it's nowhere near today. There are advances in gender equality, but at the time that we're talking about, yeah, you're looking forward to a lifetime of ridicule and possible harm in any kind of way because of that. So relatively uneventful teen years, and then he signs up for military service.
At 14, yep.
And by and large, I think from all accounts, he excelled.
Yeah.
He found a niche. He had a purpose. He had a roof over his head. He had his own room. He was commended for his work ethic, his accomplishments. And
But He
Then
also
here comes the but.
he also was as we know, since he was homosexual, he was also shy and reserved, so he drank a lot.
Yeah.
At this point, he would drink to the point where he would think that would overcome his shyness, and even at one point in time, he woke up on the floor of a friend's apartment after having had a drink, you know, and this he was hoping that basically something sexual happened, but nothing did happen. But at this point, this was a big fantasy for him, which in essence, this is at 14, he already established his way of how he wanted to kill people.
Yeah.
This is what he
According to
did.
him,
He would bring men home, get them drunk, and then kill them.
yeah. So his prey were the fringe already. It wasn't just a homosexual partner he met at a bar, pub, club. He looked, scouted for those who were young, trusting, shivering, hungry, down and out, and would promise them shelter, food, meal. We'll listen to music. We'll drink a little bit more. It's a warm place I have. I'll take care of you. And of course, those in destitute, this is a home run, and they go. So yes, apparently that whole episode where he passed out kind of set the roots
Mm-hmm.
for his ultimate fantasy. I mean, he claims that being a chef was the happiest time of his life because he got notoriety, he got praise, and he was very good at it. And his military service pointed to that. He got advancements everywhere he was. He ended up being a supervisor. He did point out that I guess, and this may tie into it again, whether this really happened or not, but during stationed in Germany, that he claimed an Arab cab driver had tried to kidnap him
Yeah.
and stuff him in the trunk. And he escaped, he wrestled his way out and knocked out the driver. And then, but he had mentioned that that kind of stuck in his head when you throw in the fantasy, kidnapping, and the water, which everything that he did. In addition to, and here we're getting really graphic, people, his own confession that he never, not like this really matters, people, he never penetrated a body. He just masturbated over it after they're dead.
Yeah.
Not only dead, he would store bodies into floorboards and every now and then take them out, have his thing, put them back.
Yeah. He put him in talcum powder and the whole
thing. He'd do a dance, like a whole ritual thing. There were times he had strangled, drowned, killed the victim, lay them on bed, have them pose on a chair for days, weeks, months.
Yeah. He said, going back to his stay in Germany, this is, in his formative years, he also said that the painting, the raft of the Medusa, gave him necrophilic, fantasies. And at that point, he started, again, his words, masturbating in front of a mirror, to simulate sex with another man. And at this point, he also got a prostitute and paid for sex, and so he could have sex with a woman for the first time.
That was his first female sexual encounter,
in which he found the experience overrated and depressing. And at this point, he said, "You know what? Yes, I'm homosexual."
Yeah. But he went back to his fellow officers, and of course, bragged,
Yeah, you got something.
how he shagged a rotten.
Fast forward to 1972, he retires, he goes home, and his brother outs him to his mama, basically. That he's
Yeah, they have he's done with the military, and he's figuring out what to do with his life. And it seems like it's well, he paints a picture like it's a grandiose homecoming, and his brothers and sisters there. He's got like five other siblings from half siblings from the next marriage, and they happen to be watching a documentary.
yes.
And they're watching a documentary about gay men.
Mm-hmm.
And then a debate, an argument, discussion, whatever you want to call it, ensues. Something where there's, very polar viewpoints, and he defends gay rights, which of course you should. At the time, it's not the favorable argument. And in that house in particular, because of the older brother who's obviously homophobic, trashes him completely. They get into a fight. They never speak again. And he decides, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he heads to London.
And what does he do? He becomes a cop.
Yeah, well, this is the segment where we have now laid the groundwork for who he is.
No.
And
I mean, here is where I get a little,
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. He has military training.
Yes.
Right. So if you look at him, and again, you can't judge a cover all the time by the book by the cover, but he doesn't look like an overpoweringly strong individual. But he does have military training. No, he does have discipline. He does have physical training. Now you throw in the fact that he's an officer of the law. He also has knowledge, what you can or cannot do, what you can get away with, what's the limits of the law, ins and out, particular ways to phrase things for arrest. Now, his colleagues would tell you that he never really got physically involved in arrests and altercations. A few times here and there. But he by and large, I guess the quote from the movie, from the documentary is, it wasn't his interest. It wasn't his thing. And by his accounts, it wasn't either. He didn't stay long as an officer, but he was an officer long enough to know what he can get away with.
Of course, look, which goes deeper into what we're talking about, how a person goes 3 to 4 years undetected in London. There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
the one time where he got caught red-handed. All right, which let's get into that real quick. If you saw the documentary, it goes into how one of the guys they interviewed was actually a friend of his. They called him Des. What they called Nilsen. And he was like, "Oh, my friend Des was, he was a nice guy, whatever. They were quite reserved to himself, this and that. But by all accounts, fairly normal. This happens. A guy jumps out the window. For all intents and purposes, then he is a person of interest. They're about to freaking press charges. Then they call the kid's father. Right? Am I getting correctly?
Yeah.
Call the kid's father, and they decline to press charges. At this point, his ex-partner, ex-coworker is like, dude, Dennis is fucked up. This is some crazy shit he did. He is a bad dude.
And they know that they tell him too. They tell him to his face, you're lucky.
He's like, yeah. And
he seems relatively unaffected.
He would have had life in prison.
Yeah, he would have been dead to rights.
So once again, the fucking legal system, the justice system, hey, even across the pond, shat the bed.
You can make an argument that this is, the Brotherhood of the Shield, taking care of their own, if
Yeah,
you
but
will.
see, but look at it. But then 12 people, heck, 15 people died for that. That we know
Yes.
that we know that he confirmed that he confessed and confirmed were there. We,
And now
all
that
of the
we're getting
people
to that,
that escaped that could have been, all the people that he hurt, this and the other stuff. And
now that we got into that, let's dive into it.
do it. Let's do it. Let's do a deep dive.
He is living in at this point in an attic apartment, and we're
Do it.
talking about in February 4, 1983. And this is where it gets um theater of the moron, or the theater of the stupid, for being as calculated a killer as he's been, and then getting away with it for a span of almost 5 years. He's a moron. Where he pens a letter of complaint to the owners of the apartment that the plumbing is not working and this is intolerable. Are you a moron? So, in
Well,
response, like 4 days later, plumbing company comes in, plumber by the name of Michael Catran. He goes to the side house trap. I guess he opens it up and he goes, "What the hell is this? It's a bunch of gooky little fleshy stuff and hair. And what is that, bone?"
yep.
And doesn't, scratch his head like, what to make of this? This isn't like, I don't think this is animals and stuff, but how do I get? So he calls in his supervisor. They all take a look like, all right, let's talk to the people in the house. They actually even talk to him. So this is where irony is life. The plumbing group goes and talks to the tenants, one of which is him, the guy, Dennis complained about it. They talk to him, and Dennis's response is, looks like somebody's flushing down a lot of KFC. Are you serious? To which they come back the next day.
Finger licking good.
They come back the next day. They open up the manhole drain and it's been cleared. But not all the way. Because I don't care if you're over there all night long with gloves and a trash bag. You stuff a lot of bodies in that thing. This is where they start going through the plumbing again, all the way up to his apartment. And there's more of this bone and fleshy material. I think they probably look at each other, much like you and I look at each other with the eyeball. We're like, we'll call the cops on this one.
Yeah,
When
and
the cops come, and if you want to take it from here, when the cops come, this is where it just gets
no,
bizarre and bizarre.
go ahead, keep it going.
So the cops come and they start talking to all the tenants, and they start talking to eventually get to him. And I have no idea what's going through uh, Dennis's mind. Nilsen possibly was looking just for it to all stop, or somebody to stop him. He answers the door, and initially, I think he tries to just give these canned answers, and like oblivious. Oh, I don't know. Oh, maybe I don't. The cops ask him outright. Listen. Oh, I'm sorry. They take some of the bone and stuff, and they bring it to the pathologist. And the pathologist examine the bones and flesh and remains and go, "Oh no, this is human." In fact, there's a piece of skin, looks like from the neck, that has ligature marks or strangulation marks. So now the cops are, we're going to go talk to the people. This is where they talk to Nilsen. They talk to people in the house, and they ask him outright, "Where's the rest of the body?"
It goes. Sorry, let me interject one thing. They knock on the door. They're talking to Nilsen. They smell the same odor of body decomposition.
It's an unmistakable odor. For
Exactly.
you out there who don't know, I work in this actual field. Once you smell this, It's unmistakable.
They told him, "Oh, we found human remains." He was astonished, dumbfounded, even appalled.
Not KFC.
Not KFC. Then they asked him, "Oh, where's the rest of the body?" "Oh, in the closet."
Two huge bags. I mean,
Now,
huge.
here is where we can't even, do it justice. Just watch the documentary, and they show the pictures, or you can find them on the internet also. Anyway, two
I mean,
garbage bags in the closet, and wait, what?
the only we could tell you guys is place yourself in these officers' boots. You're at the door. The place stinks to high heaven of rotting bodies. This individual presents you to huge. We're talking about what you probably will fill your trash bags full of leaves and come end of autumn. I mean, probably 30. I'm estimating 30-gallon big tie bags.
Oh,
And you're looking at it and you stare at him. You smell the smell. You stare at the two huge bags. Like, what the hell? To make things even more bizarre, he outright tells them, "I'll tell you everything, but not here.
yeah.
I'll tell you at the police precinct, at the police station."
Ask him, "Oh, how many more bodies?" "Oh, yeah, like Rocker said, we I feel more comfortable telling you. I'll tell you all about it. We'll get back to the station." What?
On the way to the station in the car, he tells them, "Oh, for like very casually, very cavalierly, 15 or 16." Kind of like, shrug it off. I lost count.
Since 1978. So already you're like, what? So we're talking 5 years, 4 to 5 years of this is going on. Okay. Then obviously once there, he starts naming people that what he remembers. And now the investigation is on. You need to find out who these bodies are, who these people are.
Yeah, and we can't go into an enumeration of each
No.
victim. Out of respect, we won't actually watch the documentary, and they won't even do that there. You can look that up, but the modus is the same. He lures them to the home. He gets them comfortable, liquors them up. They pass out, or he strangles them. They pass out. Sometimes they're revived a few times. Then he ends up drowning all of them. After they're dead, he does a ritual. He plays and fondles, masturbates. He keeps them in the floorboards, until months go by. Months where he'll start slowly decapitating them because you got maggots, flies, rot, and either flush them down the toilet, put them in bags. And in Carroll Gardens, one of the places that he lived, he actually had access to the garden, the backyard.
Because what he used to do in the place where he didn't have enough room, he would dismember the bodies, and what he could flush down the toilet, case in point, he would, and then he disposed of the other ones. Oh, put them in his closet.
And he would boil the heads so that the flesh would come out, and you're left with the skull. And I will tell you, no pun intended, everyone, skull bone is the toughest bone in the body. One of the toughest bones. It's hard to crack.
It's me. Is it okay? As you mentioned before, the smell is unmistakable. Doesn't anybody say anything? Does anyone smell anything?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're on the attic floor, you're the top floor. How do you not smell this thing?
I mean, even before, when he was at Carroll Gardens, he was in, and
yeah,
he had the
bonfires.
Bonfires. Doesn't anyone after the fourth bonfire be like, "Hey, dude, what the hell?" I mean,
not just a bonfire. He would say that he would put a car tire on top of it, and if anybody ever smelled rubber really burning, I'm not talking about NASCAR where you're braking real fast. I'm talking actually burning rubber. That thing reeks. It's a acrid, bitter scent that just permeates your nose. You can't escape that stuff. I mean, is it part of London or his neighborhood where everybody turns a blind eye and they keep to themselves and they don't report this stuff?
Yeah, but even people turning a blind eye, even over here in New York, you would say, "Oh, all this is going on and whatever. And but people be like, hey, yo, shh, freaking stinks, do something. And
Yeah, I mean, you got a couple of bodies. You can't burn that thing in a couple hours. You're smoking.
freaking cops, do something.
You're stoking some
Insane.
flames for a few hours, if not the entire day. Um, According to his confessions thereafter, he would take the charred remains, use a rake to break them all up, and then rake the entire gardens to hide and embed the burnt bones and remains, ashes of the victims in the earth. So going back and forth into the documentary, they were told by the police, who, I guess, the forensics team, they weren't finding everything in the beginning, but he must have buried them deep over some time as they slowly, I guess, sifted through the garden. They got to a point where they were finding nothing but bones.
Yeah, you had to sift through the garden, through the whole freaking garden. Bones and bones and bones. And we all know that he got rid of so many pieces. So it's just crazy.
So this sick puppy, he stalked, he prayed, he did these. In particular, there were a couple. One in particular, survivors. One in particular, Stoddard. Stoddard was a victim who did escape, and according to him, he too was facing ridicule and then ostracization from his life if he were to testify. But according to him, he was strangled. He woke up and he was in a bathtub full of water. And Nilsen told him, shh, be still. He managed to escape. Whether Nilsen had a change of heart or he found an opening and he escaped with his life. But he knew with every fiber in his body, Nilsen is a calculated, premeditated murderer.
Of course.
And we're segueing into that now because Nilsen, also being a former cop, knows the law. And in the very beginning, with his confessions, no coercion, no twisting of arms, voluntary confessions, initially pleading guilty. Weeks before his trial, fired the lawyer, changed his plea to what the hell? Do you have the exact? I'm so sorry. It was something to the temporary, not insanity, but irresponsibility or something. Deferred responsibility, diminished responsibility, I believe.
Exactly. Now,
which I've never heard of, to be honest.
They during the trial, actually for the trial, he was assessed by two psychiatrists to determine whether or not he was sane. They said they found difficulty with his emotions, and because the only one that he could express was anger. Every other emotion he was shut down. One of the psychiatrist diagnosed him with borderline pseudo-normal narcissistic personality disorder.
That's a mouthful.
And he also suffered from occasional schizoid outbreaks. Okay. It worsened as a result of his social isolation. Okay. They're saying that he was aware of his actions, intellectually aware of his actions, but not of their nature, if you can believe that. Okay. So, but he had willingly chosen to objectify people, and that's what made him have no mental disorder, basically. Okay. was a manipulative individual capable of forming relationships who had willingly chosen to objectify people, and he had no mental disorder as a result. Bang.
Well, he self proclaimed that he had multiple failed relationships and just felt like he was just not the type to be in a relationship.
By the way, I need to interject one thing. For somebody that said Carroll Gardens, it was Cranley Gardens.
Cranley, yeah, sorry. So my armchair psychology opinion is it's a lot of horse dung. That's a lot of horse shit. I think I think his mindset, he knew enough that he incriminated himself. He's done. I don't know. I don't think they had a death penalty at this time, which was kind of crazy. I think he was making a last ditch effort to save his ass, and he was reaching really deep to lessen the sentence. If anything, maybe get off in 25 years, which is unfathomable and unconscionable that somebody would confess to doing these heinous acts, get arrested. You're talking about 15 to 16 victims. 7, he claims, got away. It could have been very well in the 20s. Hell, 1 is bad enough. And he's trying to scapegoat now to get out of this whole thing. When every victim, every situation reeks of premeditation, you're a cold ass killer.
And the funny thing, he said he never had a premeditated plan to kill any of his victims. Rather it was something that just suddenly occurred just before.
No one's arguing that he's a sick puppy, but also nobody can argue, especially himself, that he didn't premeditate this thing. He went out there with the intention to get sauced up, down and out individuals, to be easy prey, easy targets, liquor them up at home so that they're easy and subduable, and kill them in their stupor. Then have his way with them. He can cry and regret all he wants. He did it.
He's a predator of the greatest man. It doesn't change the fact that or doesn't make it any less or worse or more worse the fact that it was a bunch of guys instead of a bunch of girls.
Yeah, and we're restating this from the video from the Netflix documentary. Just like everything else that we've investigated from different time periods, you have to look at the sign of the times at the time. There was economic strife in London, just like in most of the world in late 70s into the 80s. There's a lot of homelessness, a lot of jobs, a lot of political issues.
Times were tough. Times were it was just in the 70s where the 70s were really
hard up on everybody.
I mean,
you got a lot of desperate people, a lot of tension, and he did his deeds. The fact that he got caught and they didn't fumble up the whole trial and everything too bad. He was finally prosecuted and he remained in bars for the rest of his life. Initially, he wasn't so much, and then they overturned it to the rest of his life. He was eligible, I think, after 25 years, which is, again, mind-boggling.
Which is, yeah. But he said that he was okay with staying. He was staying in jail. He did not want to go get, come out.
And go with the general public.
Now, he was only convicted of, he was only sentenced for 6.
6
of the 15. Because of course, they couldn't find jokes aside.
I'll say it. That's my opinion. They couldn't
find they couldn't distinguish the bodies. Because everything was
charred. If you don't have dental records, you can't really prove it.
It's a shame that those people,
all I can say is 1 was enough.
Yeah, man.
And then you have evidence enough for multiple bodies because there were more human remains that they add up. They could not have been 1, 2, 3, 4. You get to an academic point where, like, okay, you killed your second person. how does that really have any difference than you kill your 20th person?
You know, look,
You're multiple killer. This is not self-defense. We're not talking about manslaughter. We're not talking about accident or a crime of passion or any of the above. You had a whole modus operandi, and then what you do after the fact with the whole sexual ritual,
no,
the
the dude is
decapitation.
probably one of the sicker individuals we know. I mean, and I know we all in the media and everything else, we get desensitized to everything, and we're like, oh, Tony killed 4 people, and you look at, oh wow, double digits, oh 15, wow, it's a lot. Nah, man, that's a lot, man. It's a lot, and that's what we know that he confessed to, that he confirmed it was between 12 and 15, because there is no, because you don't know. They couldn't find the rest of it. They couldn't find proof of the rest.
Now, the only other aspect of this whole
I mean, they
twisted
found
case,
pieces. They found obviously body parts, but like, as Raka said, I mean, no
yeah,
identifying marks. Two,
without identifying parts, and then with the infancy of DNA, and then you chart it, so it's not like it's viable to begin with.
yeah.
All right, so the only other, I guess, aspect of this whole twisted case is so he wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
and then it now is a very gray area in many justice systems. You're a criminal. Forget what kind of degree you are, but you write a book. Can you publish that book? What are you going to do with the proceeds of said book? Manson went through this. All these other killers went through this. I think Son of Sam, I mean, you name it. Should you even get the notoriety? Should you even get $1 from this? Should all the revenue go to the victims? If you're the victims' families, do you even want $1 of this?
Well, look, first of all, that
Now,
book
the only
was
thing you can do is funnel the money back to victims like mental health and maybe a charitable donation that is constructive. Maybe do it blindly so they don't know it's directly coming from you. But at the same time, should somebody convicted of such heinous acts even profit from the fame of it all?
Well, look, how about take any other book or that's based up on a serial killer that they had a hand in. I mean, or paintings that they've drawn. Right?
I would like to take the viewpoint that said books and documents could be used and utilized best by using as a case study for criminologists, for FBI, for detectives, for any task force, so that they can actually enrich the profiling aspect to catch more bad guys. Other than that, I don't think you should have one exposure to this to the general public. Well, it's reliving nightmares. It's injustice to the deceased victims and the victims' families. And I just don't see a plus side to any of it. I get it. We are true crime fans. There's a lot of true crime fans out there. I'd rather know about the proceedings and this background than actually. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
I do want to hear from them. I do actually do want to.
But there is a limit, or there's a fine line, because, for example, as we've mentioned, we've done 21, 22 of these so far, and we're going to continue until you guys are bored of it, whatever. And we bring you the information we have and give our opinions, as opinionated as we are, because we are dead dudes. But we don't give you the details on the victims unless it's absolutely necessary. That's a choice that we've made.
Right. And we've made a choice too that unless it's inescapable, like a very very famous victim or something, I don't see how it helps or the case to even mention the victim's name. But, again, notoriety, respect to the family, last name and friends and family, whatnot. If it's something extremely public, like such public knowledge, just mention the name because it's very pertinent to the case. Okay.
Of
But
course.
for the most part, it's not really necessary. I could tell you Jane Doe was killed in this manner and this is her background and everything else. It makes no difference whether I told you a real name or not.
But it's a perfect example how in the documentary they showed some of the tapes and they mentioned and they talked a lot about it, but not everything. It was
Right.
well done. It was respectful. How about that?
It
And
was very respectful and to
that,
the point that, well, case in point, I mentioned only one victim's name, Stoddard.
yeah.
And I make that point because obviously he's a very integral witness. He's a very integral person in the documentary, and he actually deserves notoriety and he needs to be highlighted because his journey, at least showcased in the documentary, was one from initially wanting to not testify and get involved to a very heralded and respected viewpoint of he could not let this go, cannot let this individual leave. He had to tell his story, regardless of the backlash he would incur, which is very heroic, so that it can help put Nielsen behind bars forever. Because he could have well died. And in my opinion, he had a turnaround in his life and he's stronger and better for it for having the balls to testify, to stand up to severe criticism, both in the court of public and private opinion.
Oh,
And so I mentioned his name in particular.
key cog in the resolution.
Last thoughts.
Well, what else could be said about this? As far as another sick deranged individual that, and I think to a degree, I get it because someone who is sane can't, you would think, cannot commit these crimes. So yeah, you say sick and deranged individual, but that's almost giving them an out, and I always have an issue with that.
Absolutely. That's why I prefer the term misguided, twisted core who has no problem with calculating and formulating a plan. No problem with executing said plan. But the plan is not an insane person would just take a bus and drive it through a bank wall thinking they're going to score on a cash robbery without realizing they'll probably die in the process. They have no way out. There's no premeditation. It's an insane plan. This individual is so twisted, but has the wherewithal to logically plot out how to do it, how to repeat it, how to get away with it. And in that sense, whatever the legal interpretation is, should fry the motherfucker. But that's just one person's opinion.
We'd love to know what you guys think of this episode, and in general, do you guys and gals want more obscure true crime and serial killers, or should we start taking on the quote unquote more well known heavy hitters out there? Let us know because we really want to know how which direction should we go from here.
Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us in our continuing true crime series. These individuals are all on a different level. And again, thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. And we will hit you up next time. And also be on the lookout for more of our paranormal investigations.
Definitely.
And everything else that we do, comic books, movies, TVs, Hollywood news, video games, anime, cartoons alike. We are coming close to, well, it's a month away from October and New York Comic Con. And there's a lot of things on the horizon. We'll keep you posted. And thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks to everybody for everything. And please like, comment, subscribe. I'm Izzy.
I'm Raka. Thanks a lot. Save the whales.